Pluto is a mind-bending show with a suspenseful story. From its intense plot twist to its morally ambiguous characters, there's a lot to unpack here. But what exactly is Pluto about? Why does it stand out in the massive world of manga, and how does it compare to the rest of the author's works? Don't worry, we'll get to that. Pluto was written by Naoki Urasawa, the genius behind Monster and 20th Century Boys. It reimagines Osamu Tezuka's Astro Boy, primarily its The Greatest Robots on Earth arc, in a way that's a lot more mysterious and introspective than its original source material. The show is about a detective named Geishit and his journey to uncover the truth behind a series of robot murders. The city is a vibrant yet empty and oddly enough bleak place. The characters are rash and sometimes downright stupid, but there's always this feeling that something is wrong. And it's gotta be this car's CGI. What the fuck am I even looking at? Our main character, Gezicht, is a detective and a damn good one at that. He's an AI who looks strikingly human and holds himself up to a pretty high moral standard. Throughout the series, we see Gezicht struggle with defining the line between humanity and robots. He acts like a human, but is honest to a fault, always letting the people around him know that he's an AI despite the way he looks. He shows empathy, has dreams, and showcases a strong sense of justice, traits that are typically attributed to humans. Because of this, Gezicht is under constant surveillance, and while we have a basic understanding of why someone like him would need to be monitored, we don't fully get it yet. It isn't until the story unfolds that we know what exactly makes Gezicht different, and that adds on to the feeling that something is wrong. So let's dig a bit more into the plot. Our story starts off with the murder of Mont Blanc, a physically gifted AI who's widely appreciated across the globe for being a friend to children and experienced climbers alike. It's unknown what the intention behind the murder was, but if there's anything that's known from the wreckage left behind, it's that another machine had done it. Right after this, another murder takes place, this time involving a human. Bernard Lonck, an activist for robots' equal rights, was found murdered in his own place. The way his body was left? The same way that Mont Blanc was. Our main character Gezicht is in charge of finding out what exactly happened, why Mont Blanc and Bernard were killed the same way, and how on earth a robot could even commit murder to begin with. But this isn't completely unheard of. In fact, another robot by the name of Brown 1589 had killed a human 8 years ago itself. Pinned to a wall, Brow still lives, and luckily for Gezicht, he's got a lot of information regarding the intentions behind the crime. He tells Gezicht about how some Roman gods were depicted with antlers, and amongst them, a god named Pluto. Something is wrong. The art of the series is honestly pretty damn good. You have these brilliantly colored scenes that fit the atmosphere of the show perfectly, and the CGI, while sometimes a bit jarring, isn't exactly the worst we've seen in the industry. Sometimes it fit perfectly and would showcase a scene that would give me goosebumps due to the scale of it and the alien feeling it gave. The music is pretty great, I'd say. It's not necessarily memorable, but it's not terrible by any means. I think Yugo Kanno has made some better soundtracks though, especially since I've seen what he can do with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, making some extremely iconic songs like Il Vento d'Oro and Stardust Crusaders. I do, however, think it suits the mood. It's got this empty feeling, a part always seems to be missing, and so it does fit nicely into the atmosphere. It sits comfortably in the grand scheme of things and is very reminiscent of Monster's OST. I had to rewatch the series just to get a better understanding of how the music fits in. Which, to be fair, the story is sometimes a bit harder for my dumb brain to grasp, so I spent a lot more time trying to understand the plot than appreciating the art. Going forward, there will be spoilers for the series, so if you enjoy the mystery genre and want to feel some thrills, then I'd say this is a pretty damn good watch. You don't need to have watched Astro Boy to appreciate the series, though it definitely does help with the respect I feel for Urasawa for adapting something so goofy into a more serious medium. It has its ups and downs, but overall, I'd say it's worth your time. Those ups are seriously some of the highest highs I felt in a while, especially on my second watch through where everything just clicks more. So go get him, Tiger, something, fuck me. Also, before you go, if you wouldn't mind subscribing, that would be really helpful. This is my third video on this channel, and trust me, there's a lot more to come. Anyways, let's just get into it. Gezicht runs along an empty street, his breathing pattern getting more frantic over time. A burst of flame enters his vision as he finds himself staring at a pool of blood, hiding in it something that should never be shown to the world. Another burst of flames. It was just a dream. But robots aren't supposed to dream. They're just circuitry and metal fused together to create something that represents a human. And yet, everything feels real to Gezicht. His wife, Helena, bursts through the door, feigning concern because she, like him, is also a robot. And robots don't feel anything. Or at least that's what the world of humanity believes. In reality, emotions and memories are much more complex than that. Robots across the globe are evolving, rights are being initiated for them, and as robots grow smarter, humanity begins to fear them more and more. However, though the world may believe that robots are nothing but tools, Gezicht and 6 others are different. They're called the 7 greatest robots, and are uncontested in their strength. At least they used to be. Mont Blanc is ripped apart, Brando abandons his family for the sake of his pride, Hercules tries to avenge Brando. Wait, hold on. We need to extend our watch time, dude. Fine. If you've watched my other videos, well then you'll know that I have a structure to these, but in case you're new, here's what it looks like. We go over the characters, their values, and the main plot points that stand out to me. I'm going to try to explain everything in a way that somewhat resembles chronological order. As you go through the story a second time, things make a lot more sense, and as such, the structure of the story actually begins to warp itself. I apologize if things get confusing though, I'm still trying to get used to making these kinds of videos. We'll start with a standalone story from the first episode. North number 2, a robot war machine who is entirely made up of weapons, is hired to be a butler for an old musician by the name of Paul Duncan. Paul is very obviously against the existence of AI, and as such, treats all of his robot butlers like shit, leading to every single one leaving for being mistreated. His arrogance and disdain over the matter isn't completely unfounded though. I mean, he's in an age where information is just being handed out, so it feels his craft is being overtaken. Music is all he's had throughout his life, and with him being blind at all, it makes sense. We don't necessarily side with his abusive ways, but we do understand where he's coming from. Throughout the episode, North Number 2 tries to form a relationship with Paul. Though he is continuously mistreated, nothing is as bad as what he experienced on the battlefield. The PTSD sequence was amazing, except for one thing. These damn explosions did not fit into the scene as much as I think they wanted it to. It felt too realistic, detached from the scene even, and the introduction of the show really adds on to that sentiment for me, because they showcased that they could do dramatic scenes in CGI that felt connected to the world. Sometimes simplicity is better, and I think that there are times when having complex, realistic looking scenes helps with the scale, but this was one of those scenes where it felt like it should have been more contained in its original medium of 2D. We'll eventually see scenes where the CGI is really appropriate, but this to me just wasn't it. North Number 2 eventually gains Paul's favor by helping him overcome his misplaced hatred for his mother, and we get this little sequence where we get to see the two form a close bond. It was such a wholesome moment, only to be ruined by Pluto. North Number 2 passes on protecting Paul while he waits on his balcony, telling North from afar with false hope to come back home for his piano practice, knowing full well that he's passed on. Honestly, it was a somewhat depressing first episode, and I loved it. It sums up a lot of the story's narrative and wraps it up in a way that's concise and simple. Coming back to our main character, Gazicht meets Adam, another member of the Seven, who explains how he's been integrating himself into human society despite being the most advanced robot in the world. Adam lives with his little sister Udan, who's also trying to fit into society. She's a robot who's more in tune with her emotions, being built specifically for that, whereas her brother is built more for the punch fighting side of things. So despite her having the same intellect, she's not considered a part of the Seven, helping us understand that even though the Seven are considered the strongest, it doesn't necessarily make them the best. Udan would meet a robot out in the streets and help nurse him back to health. During this sequence, we didn't really have any idea that this was Pluto, but after watching through the show twice, this arc felt a lot more bittersweet than it did before. For those brief moments, Sahad was able to think for himself in a body that wasn't made for war, and in that time, Sahad was truly able to be free, pursuing his goal in life with someone who truly understood him. Udan might have been a bit annoying here and there, but looking back on it, she's a character that I'm glad was included in this story. She creates a sort of balance between the rest of the cast, being probably the most human of the robots we end up meeting with maybe the exception of Adam and Gazicht. We'll get back to Adam later, seeing as he's extremely important in the grand scheme of things, but for now, let's just move on to other characters. We got Hercules and Brando, the two meatheads who didn't really do much thinking and a lot more acting. Brando's a family man who knew he was up next, but with his fighting spirit, decided to fight Pluto by himself. Brando gives it a pretty good fight from what we can tell, and while he does do his own fair share of damage, it isn't enough. Also look at the CGI. Jesus Christ, now that's creepy and gives us scale. I like it! Seeing Brando balance his sense of duty and his love for his family at the end was something that helped push Urasawa's narrative. It's extremely human and makes the entire section feel real. Brando knew he was supposed to send whatever information he had gotten on Pluto to the group, but instead he couldn't control his emotions and ended up prioritizing his family first, thinking of them at the end. And just like that, Brando probably realizes just how big of a mistake it was for him to have put his ego on the line. He has regrets, and yet again, we feel more compelled to believe that these robots aren't just soulless scrap. Also, Hercules finding Brando's arm stuck in the ground like horns was horrific and gave me the same heebie-jeebies I felt way back when I first met Johan in Monster. Urasawa's works just have a way of tapping into that feeling of unease without being way over the top, and that really adds onto the feeling that something is wrong. Okay, so Hercules basically dies the same way trying to avenge Brando, but with Epsilon there with him, who, for some reason, refuses to do anything to help. Brother, we do not care that you are a pacifist. Your friend is dying. Do something. Literally anything. Something is wrong with you, bro. In the end, Epsilon did have the correct answer to preventing the entire situation, but he was too early to it while lacking the correct evidence for it. As we continue to unwrap the mystery behind who Pluto is, we meet Adolf Haas, a man whose hatred for artificial intelligence is boundless. While his wife and son may not share his sentiments, Adolf has his reasonings, and though they're kind of more like excuses, they're not completely baseless. Adolf lost his brother to a robot, who turns out to be none other than Gazicht. Despite Adolf even acknowledging that his brother was inhuman and the worst, he still hates Gazicht for being the one to pull the trigger and still being alive. While the truth was hidden from the rest of the world, Adolf knew and decided to seek revenge, not truly understanding the full reasoning behind why Gazicht committed murder. And as we question how Gazicht broke past his limiter, we're given the answer from none other than Brau. A sudden influx of negative emotions. More importantly, hatred. Gazicht and his wife had a child years ago. They took him in, cared for him, and felt genuine love, only for his son to become a victim to Adolf's brother's murder spree. Adolf's brother tortured and killed Gazicht's son, creating a rush of negative emotions, something that was especially dangerous for an AI as sophisticated as Gazicht. It's why as Adam dies, he asks if Gazicht was the one who killed him. Gazicht and Pluto are extremely similar in that they're both capable of hatred, it's just one of them was stopped before it could get out of hand. Seeing Adam's final message to Gazicht, it makes us wonder on our first watch through, are they one and the same? Something is wrong. It's eventually revealed to us that Gazicht and Adolf had a chat before leaving each other, opening Adolf's eyes to Gazicht's point of view through one simple question: does the hatred stay forever? And Adolf's answer really encapsulates a lot of what the show is about. I don't know if it ever goes away, maybe it stains us, but I know I don't want to hate you anymore. And with this, Adolf's arc is tied up and the cycle of hate between these two finalizes itself, leaving them with the answer that would change the fate of the entire planet. Pluto is still out there, and with Gezicht and Epsilon being the last of the 7, it's not looking all too bright for them. Gezicht gets a lead on who Pluto is from Hercules, and he gets back onto the main quest. And I gotta say, this entire episode was fucking terrible. And I mean that in a good way. The dialogue between Gezicht and Ali was heartbreaking. Knowing what happens in the future, but also fully knowing about Gezicht's past, really makes this whole sequence a lot more painful. His fatherly instincts never left him. His care for Ali in those moments was genuine, and we see how much he cares about the people around him. He might try to pass it off as his coding telling him to be that way, but he honestly has no idea the extent of his humanity, how vulnerable he was in this episode, and how despite just being a series of ones and zeros, he has a soul. Gezicht finally confronts Pluto while his doctor is taken hostage. The two duke it out and damn! This boy can fight. We see how Abula has been controlling Sahad and how much pressure is being put on Sahad for something he doesn't agree on. We see Abula's stance on hatred and how driven he is to get his revenge on the world for stealing what was his, to the point that he'd imprison his own son and ruin his dreams. Gezicht resigns from his position at Europol, needing time away to cope with the fact that he had killed before and had memories involuntarily erased from him. On his way back home, Gezicht picks up some flowers for his wife amidst a storm, ready to finally take some time off of work to kick his feet up and relax. Anton, a delivery robot from the store he just picked flowers up from, shows up again. Gezicht recognizes him, surprised to see something is wrong. And just like that, our main character goes down. And personally, I think the most heartbreaking part of it all is that as Gezicht passes on, he remembers Robita, telling Ali that he has another little one just like him, only for Ali to drop dead right in front of his eyes mid-sentence as Gezicht hopelessly witnesses the death of another child. This was generally one of the best twists I've seen in an anime like this. Gezicht isn't reincarnated as much as we'd like him to be, there's only one member left of the 7, and he's a fucking pacifist, and Sahad is back to being wrapped around Abula's finger. We watch as his wife Helena copes with the news of her husband's death. She's given the option to erase her memories of him, to start fresh, but she doesn't. It's a great callback to the first time we meet Gezicht, when he offers to erase the memories of the wife of a constable robot who passed on. Those memories are moments nobody should ever tamper with, something they'd rather carry the burden of till death. And at the end of the episode, we see her cry, with a pain that can't be simulated without a key component: actual emotions. After this, we go back to Epsilon. The dude is being kinda in the background trying to keep everyone safe without raising a fist. He's not necessarily in the wrong for doing this, but it isn't until he's actually backed into a corner that we see how powerful this dude is. I mean, he can literally just set off a nuke at any time he wants, so I don't really blame him anymore for being much of a pacifist at this point in the story. But thankfully, when push comes to shove, he does protect the ones he really cares about, and this dude cooks when it comes down to it. He no-diffs Pluto, and boom, everyone's happy. Until these stupid idiot moron heads sell Wasily. This one really pissed me off. This was Epsilon's kid, not yours, and you fucking sold him? Without a background check? In a world where you can get information at any time? Oh my god. This was a moment where my immersion was broken. I knew this was just to further the plot, and I just think it could have gone a whole lot better. If Wasily was kidnapped, it would have actually worked here. Abula is now known for being the main culprit. Epsilon isn't home and there's nobody guarding the kids. Also, why Wasily, man? That's messed up. The kid's gone through an emotional roller coaster of a life already. Why the fuck would you go through with selling him of all people? These two should be in prison for that. Oh, and Abula being like, oh, you saw Bora, so I have to kill you. Brother, you're gonna be doing it in like a couple days. Why does it matter if you saw it? Everyone's gonna die. Anyways, rant done. Epsilon goes to save him, and we get this amazingly animated sequence where we begin to understand Sahad a little bit more as he begs for death. Sahad knows that he's never going to achieve his dreams. He can't ever forgive himself for being Pluto, even though he couldn't do anything about it. He's so far gone that he'd rather die. And Epsilon, being as naive as he is, extends a helping hand. Only for the bite of 87 to happen. And Wasily witnesses this all. Jesus, this poor kid. He saw his whole world collapse twice and was sold without much effort to a sketchy dude by the idiots that were in charge of caring for him. So yeah, Epsilon's gone. And Adam wakes up. He now knows everything. He's been caught up to the current events, and he sees and feels everything Gezicht witnessed. Their souls tied together now. And Adam evolves. He feels hatred, sorrow, anger, all of it. He feels the pain that Gezicht felt back when Robita was killed. He understands Sahad's pain, and he feels the sorrow that Gezicht felt as he died. Adam spends the next couple days planning the destruction of the planet, an insane amount of negative emotions circulating through him as he continues to process everything. His path looks like it's leading towards being the next Abula, but then he hears Gezicht and Adolf's talk. The cycle of hatred isn't something that needs to continue. These two men show that in the resolve to fix up a conflict that didn't need to exist, to hear each other out and showcase that eventually we can move on. And finally, Adam is complete. He's become the perfect robot, one capable of hatred and care, with all of his memories intact unlike Gezicht. He's not a morally black and white character like Brow was. He's now lived 3 lives, and all of the wisdom of each of them has culminated into this, and now the lines between man and machine are impossible to differentiate between. Honestly, after this, it gets a lot more cheesier, becoming more in tune with its Astro Boy counterpart. I don't think it's a serious negative, and I don't know how Urasawa would make it otherwise, but that loss of mystique did change the mood of the show for me. Bora wasn't really the greatest reveal to me, and though I actually really like how Tenma was the one who created Abula and Goji, it just felt like something was missing. The ending of the show was pretty decent, but it didn't really have me wanting more. Adam was complete, Abula was defeated, and honestly, in the grand scheme of things, that's all that really mattered. 8.5 out of 10. It's really good. It's got its ups and downs, and the ending wasn't nearly as satisfying as other shows, but I'd say the narrative is top tier. There's a lot I would have loved to go over, but the script is like 4,000 words and I'm tired. Maybe I'll come back to it one day if I'm out of ideas. Anyways, leave a comment down below what you think of the show. I replied to them.